Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. We're doing a impromptu episode of Ready Steady Played to cover Rise and Fall, which is a game from Christoph Bollinger and Ludicali with art by Guillaume Bouchin, Dogan Oztel, Guillaume Tavernier, and Sabrina Tobal. And of course, it is live right now. I think it's on GameFound, but I'll put a link in the description if you want to find it. And so we played it at the UKG. Well, we didn't really. We had a chance to demo it briefly, and they let me walk away with a prototype, which I have since played. So I thought I'd give you the lowdown on what we thought about it. Spoiler, I quite like it. But if you want to find out more, hang around. We're going to talk a bit about the rules, and then we'll talk a bit about the gameplay session that I had with it. And to help me through this whole process is Michael. Hey everybody, Mike from editing here. Unfortunately, for some reason, OBS didn't record Michael's audio for this. I don't know why this has happened. His audio was coming through in the audio meter throughout, so it's kind of unexplained at the moment, something I'll have to look into. But I have had to edit around the sections where we discuss the game because, of course, you can't hear his side of it, which is really unfortunate because we had some good discussion. But I hope that what I've left inside here, my insights into Rise and Fall and what I thought of it, will still help you to decide if this is a game you want to get involved in. Thanks for watching. What we've got here is Rise and Fall. Christoph Bollinger is a French designer. He's probably most well known for the game Archipelago, but he also did Living Planet, which is kind of a sort of inspired by that game re-implementation. But I haven't had a chance to play it. I've actually only played Archipelago, so I've got a sort of a selection of the components from Rise and Fall out here on the table, and I'll just give you guys a brief sort of overview of how the game works and what it's all about. It's a civilization game charting the rise and fall of civilizations. So you will start with very few pieces on the board. You'll start by building the board, and you can actually see here that what we've got is all these different land types laid out. This is a very small version. There's loads of this in the box. This isn't even big enough for a two-player game. I've just set out the various different types to show you the examples. So you can see you've got these water tiles with grass tiles on top and forest tiles, and then a mountain tile with a little snowy peak here, and it's all layered on top of each other to create this 3D effect of risen terrain. So once the game begins proper, we're going to take it in turns going around the table to play a card from our civilization. We start with only the cards that belong to the pieces we have. So we've got 7 different pieces in our civilization. We've got these little merchants' caravans here. These are the screen-printed wooden meeples. So this will come in the deluxe version of the game if you back that on GameFound. These screen-printed ones. If you get the basic version, it won't have the screen printing on it. Oh, they're really attractive. Yeah, they look wonderful. You got the ship sailing here with its little flag and everything. I think actually the ships might have different. Yeah, the ships have different art on the sails as well. I don't know if the blue one's going to show up very well here. That's okay. See, the players themselves, the in the core game are symmetrical, but there are these asymmetrical player clans that you can play with. I haven't even opened them. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to look at them. But so you can introduce asymmetrical civilizations that way. So here's the 7th unit, a mountaineer riding on a little cat. And so what you'll do at the start of the game is every player will get a certain amount of pieces that they're going to deploy onto the board. And I think it's not very many. It's, I think, just a boat and a cart or something like that. And it's definitely not one of each, but I think it's 3 or 4. But once you've sort of deployed them out on the board like this, the turn struck, then everyone will be ready to play after the deployment is finished. The turn structure is very simple. You just go, there's a simultaneous phase where everyone picks what card they're going to play. And the cards you have access to are the cards that are corresponding to the actual units you have on the board. So long as you have a matching unit on the board, you take the card and you put it into your hand. And if your units all go away for whatever reason, you lose a unit or the unit dies. I mean, there isn't actually combat in the game, so the only reason they'll go away is typically if you've gotten rid of them by choice. then you will actually remove the card from your hand. So you won't be able to play that card if you don't have those units anymore. And this is because, the little carts, they travel around and they become the cities. And likewise, the ships, they sail around the outside of the board here, and then they can turn into cities on land as well by settling. And so the units are constantly sort of in flux in this dynamic relationship they have where they're moving and trading and engaging. And on each of the units' cards, you've got the different actions that they can do. So here you've got all the actions for the ship, but the ship actions are move, and then this is the action that allows it to become a city, and here it's got the action that lets it... With this action, the ship can convert into a nomad or merchant piece. This one, it trades with all the cities around it. So if it's in a big ocean with lots of cities around it, it can accrue a lot of money. And at the end of the game, if you have this card in your hand, you're also going to get victory points for the number of ships that you have on the board. That's very important. Turn structure works like this. Everyone plays one card face down from their hand for the units that they have. Once everyone's played face down, everyone flips their card face up, and then the player with the first player token resolves an action from the card. Each piece can do one of the actions on the card. So the actions could be different, but each piece can only perform one action. And then once everyone's resolved their cards, those cards go into a discard. So when you reshuffle your discard, because you've run out of cards in hand, you also take the first player marker. I think that's what it is. And so this basically just repeats this cycle of, your hand of cards, play a card, move the first player token around, until eventually people start claiming these objectives up here. And these objectives are for when you have all of your... I think there's various different ones. There's probably even more associated with the Game Found campaign. But this is, for example, if you get all of your merchants out. So these caravan sort of pieces are called merchants, and when you get them all on the board, you can claim this milestone. It's worth 20 points at the end of the game. And when someone claims the milestone, every player has to burn a card from their hand. So they have to take that card and put it over here, and now it's out of the game. They cannot take actions with those units any longer. However, you can pay the 5 coins in order to recover the card, so you can take it back. Now, this is actually kind of pros and cons. Getting it out of your hand is useful because you can reset your deck faster, get back the cards you want to be playing. On the other hand, if it's out of your deck, you won't score the victory points on the bottom of the card at the end of the game for having the units out. So you want to try and sort of manage this so the cards you don't want or aren't part of your endgame plan are over here, and that you've got your cards that you want to do things with as well. And once enough of these are claimed, this is a standard game, this is a long game, and this is an epic game. Once enough of these have been claimed, you can see here the prices escalate, so it gets more and more expensive to recover cards as these tokens are claimed. Once the tokens are all claimed, then that's the end of the game, and everyone's going to tote up victory points to see who the winner is. And also there's points for money as well at the end. I think it's 1 point for 5 coins. And it is entirely possible to have an incredible economy that totally wins you the game. But you've got all of the different units sort of have capacity to generate resources. Ships primarily get money for trading. The little mountaineer here, they go up into the mountains and they claim stone and lumber. I didn't actually get the resources out, I realize. But there's three resources in the game: stone, lumber, and money. And you'll just be managing pools of these things. The monastery is quite interesting, actually. It creates money, but what it also does is if you have enemy units around it, it can convert them into yours. So it could take an action to change this guy into one of your guys. So that's the only sort of aggressive thing in the game. There's no military forces or anything like that. But then you've also got this whole territory control element, which is part of endgame, where you're going to score the terrain types by their contiguous areas. So this land mass here would be one land area. This forest is one area. There's another little 2-space forest over here. 6-space mountain, because the ice counts as part of the mountain space. And so whoever has the most pieces in these areas is going to get victory points, which are based on the size and the type. So I think these spaces on the land are only 1 point, but because there's quite a lot of them, this is quite a valuable area. I think the forest is something like 2 points, and the mountains are 3. But you've also got these merchants who can come and visit the cities and trade with them. And they're the only pieces that can occupy 2 spaces. The same space as another piece. So this is a sort of a way to also take over areas where you're tied for majority. So you can break those ties in your favor and take those area control points. So you're sort of thinking about the units on the board, you're thinking about claiming those milestones, and you're thinking about controlling these different terrain areas as well. And the water also counts towards endgame scoring. So there's a lot of different ways to get points, and of course the money as well. So you could come up with a really cool trading system to get lots and lots and lots of money and get points that way. So we only got to play 2 rounds of it, didn't we, Michael? And there was kind of a fun little mechanism that got me really excited, which I'll talk a bit about more about in a minute because we implemented it in the actual game we played. But the idea was if all the players at the table have played a card face down except for one player who hasn't, then every other player gets to put their fists out and go 1, 2, 3. And if that player hasn't played a card, then they grab one at random from that player's hand, and that's the card they have to play. So it's sort of designed to keep pace going and keep the game sort of fast. Which is a rule that I found very exciting because I love this kind of like sort of fun stress of having to keep up with everyone and play something. And I would say, that it's the mistakes we make playing games that make games interesting. It's not a particularly aggressive game because there's no military forces and there's no attacking other players really. It's more like passive aggressive, right? Because I might think I've got this forest locked down, and then Michael starts to put his pieces in there, which has sort of 2 effects. One is to block my optimal routes from this area to other areas, and then the second is like now we're tied and nobody's going to get any points. And if I move my cart away, then he might build, another unit in here, and then now I'm losing. So there's this sort of it's not direct aggression, but this like sort of passive aggressive control of these areas for the points. I remember in the game we played, the full game I played of this, 2 players getting into this real sort of tug of war over a particular mountain range and going back and forth and sort of trying to block each other out and convert each other's pieces with the monasteries and all that kind of stuff. So the pieces all have restricted movement, and how they move around is unique to them. The merchant can go up to 4 spaces, but he can't travel on water and mountains. Water is the one that's been sort of grayed out there. And he can also, it's saying he can also visit areas with other people's buildings in. I think actually he can also pass through other players' units, provided he doesn't stop on them. And then he can go into spaces with anyone's cities as well. So you can even put him in your own city to sort of stop someone else coming in there and to shore up the number of pieces you have in a given area if you're sort of trying to secure those points. But they all and so this is his trading mechanism where he's going to generate money based on the cities around him. And so all the units are quite unique. Oh, here he's going to buy or sell wood and stone for money, and here he can also become a ship for the cost of wood, so he can go into the ocean. So this little guy here can just hop into the water and become a ship, and then it can sail over here, and then it might decide I'm going to become enough pieces. It's going to become a city, So it's quite dynamic. You've got lots of different sort of options about what you're going to do. So I played a full game with the guys down at my board game club. And it was really interesting. It is not a complicated game. A few rounds in, everyone had sort of grasped everything that was going on, and they had, with the exception of the territory control, that people sort of hadn't quite figured out how to value different areas. I think it was just a dint of sort of learning experience more than anything. But there were certain areas that were a lot of points that I managed to secure quite easily, and other areas that people were fighting over, which were not actually worth that many points. But it's fundamentally a game about efficiency. Because you've got like one action or one card on your turn which activates one unit type, then each of those unit types gets to do something. The game is basically looking through your hand of cards and trying to find the card that is going to give you the most value this turn. And it's sort of like if you've got a set of cards, like maybe you've just picked up your deck again, you're looking for the card that you want to play first in order to get the sort of the most value out of the other cards, and so you're trying to optimize this order. So it is, despite the sort of the beautiful board and all the pieces moving around and this flexibility, really just a game of trying to find sort of micromanage efficiencies. And one of the guys at the club described it as feeling a lot like Splendor, which is a little tableau building economy game that I think a lot of people are familiar with. And it's not a bad comparison. It does feel, in terms of the mental gymnastics that you're doing, a lot like a scaled up version of Splendor, where you're sort of looking to try and sort of get into this area, produce these resources, and sort of the first card you're going to play is going to be somewhat suboptimal, but you kind of need to play it now so that you can do something more optimal with another card later on, you know. And so it plays quick. It played very very quickly. I think I taught it and then we played in about 90 minutes. I think there were four of us. I also think it's probably best at four. Um, I think that I think it's probably also good at 3 and 2. I haven't tried it at those player counts though, so I can't say for sure. But there's very little downtime, and it felt quite prompt.
You can't really have any downtime though because of the hand system.
Well, you can, because the downtime comes because I mean you're right. You can't on the card selection, but then what happens is after everyone's sort of played their cards and they're face up, people have to go around and activate all their pieces, and they can be very slow and thinky about that. But fortunately, it never really manifested that people suffered from analysis paralysis during that phase. So it did stick to being running at a fairly clip pace, and it's a nice game. It's solidly middleweight. It's almost light, in fact. It is. It looks much more. It looks much more complex than it is. Really, it's all relative. But I mean, it's because each turn is kind of, you basically experience the entire game in the first few phases. Like the scope comes from having more stuff to manage over time, and then this gradual decline as well as the cards leave your deck. But there's not like you're not building a massive tableau. There's no passive powers you're unlocking or anything like that. So you pretty much have seen pretty much the full scope of what you're going to do about a third of the way into the game, and it doesn't really become massively more complex after that.
But the complexity comes from the versatility of the units and the scope of their different actions though.
Yeah, no, you're bang on. The weight is 100% in finding these little efficiencies and trying to prioritize which units you're going to activate, and that's easy to make mistakes. There was a lot of cries of chagrin as people sort of were like, "Oh, I should have played that." I really enjoyed it. I'd be keen to play it again, as particularly with the same group, and see how they get along with it a second time. Maybe with the asymmetrical powers as well. That might be fun. But it's the thing is, this really nice, gorgeous looking version of the game is quite expensive, and it is I there is also a lot of stretch goals on the campaign. There's like all these unique buildings. There's a lot of unique buildings and tiles. I haven't actually looked into how they all function, but it looks like there might be quite a lot more variability added by the campaign, which could be a really good thing, because you're going to see everything in this box on one play. And so the only sort of factor of replayability when you come back to it is improving on your play from last time. You're not going to discover anything new. You're not going to see anything new. The board will change significantly because the board is actually constructed by the players. The sort of setup of the board is a communal construction project, which is really nice and fun, and it can lead to some really different and bizarre designs. You could have one board with just one massive area, and it's really just going to come down to whoever controls that area at the end of the game. There was and I've just moved this down from the mountains because I realized that cities can't be built in mountains. What we did have on the board that we built at the club was an enclosed ocean, and anyone who didn't start with their boats, it was an ocean that was surrounded on all sides by the mountains, which meant that effectively nobody could enter the ocean because any unit that wants to enter the water must come off of land or the forest, I think. I can't actually remember if they can use the forest, so maybe it's just the land into the water. What had happened was basically anyone who didn't deploy a boat in the water at the start of the game was effectively locked out of the area scoring of that area for the entire game. And that was kind of like and I mean the thing is, if you're sort of done setting up and you see these areas which are completely inaccessible, you can just fix that. Like it's sort of, it's not. I mean, you can be the kind of group that sort of sets everything up, like sort of starts the hyper competitiveness right from the beginning and says, right, we're going to build this landmass now, and we're already seeding what we want out of the game. And if you don't get what you want, too bad, because this is part of it. you can be that group, or you can say, okay, we're going to build a nice land together, and we're all going to work together to build a nice space that we're going to play in. And if there's something weird like a sea that no one can access, we'll just fix it afterwards. We'll just change the pieces before we start playing. It's really about what kind of group you are and what you think your group would prefer. So that's it. The land construction is really interesting, and I think it can create some really different play areas, and I think that's really nice. I think that's a sort of a pro for replayability of the game, especially because and again, I don't know how much extra like things like the milestone tiles they've added to the Kickstarter, but I hope there's more of them because those again will increase replayability, and they've got all these different units and things to increase replayability, and I think you want that because if you're going for this screen printed edition of the game, it is really expensive. I think it's like borderline like 100 quid. uh, so it's really expensive for a game that's relatively light, um, compared to what you would expect from like £100 game with dozens of pieces. Yeah, it's super quick to teach. Again, relatively, it's for a 90-minute game with different unit types and sort of different scoring things going on and all these different elements. It really has sort of boiled it down to a really sort of condensed core, and it's the kind of thing that people will grasp very quickly because they're just repeating the same sort of thing over and over and over again. You know, and there is sort of scope as well for different players to target the leader. So, if sub players take a couple of rounds to sort of figure their business out, and then they sort of fall behind early on, they're not going to be out of the game because there's an element of sort of like trying to spread out and sort of challenging the areas controlled by the person who appears to have the most points. So to an extent, you need to be able to read the board state and that kind of thing, but it is relatively accessible, I think, and it will be quite easy to get to the table. Yeah, I think it's sort of a solid example of a game where you can make it your main game of the night, or even something you play before a much bigger game if you have a longer session. And it kind of fits those slots, and that makes it appealing in a way. One of the things I was going to mention actually as we wrap up here is that the 1 2 3 sort of quick um, rule never actually manifested. Everyone was so fast at picking cards and sort of had a plan already when we got to that phase that we basically never had to use that. Um, so I was a little disappointed actually. I was kind of hoping to put people under pressure and would all have a laugh as they panicked, but it never really came out. Yeah, you should have been there exactly. but but so that never really manifested, which is fine though. I think the rule's only there to make sure things progress at a reasonable clip, and if it happens without implementing the rule, then that's fine. I think it also says in the rulebook that it's optional. You don't have to play with that if you don't want to. So yeah, I think the sort of the general takeaway from people was that they'd expected something a lot bigger and more complex, just based on by dint of the sort of physical appearance of the game. But I think they all relatively enjoyed it and would have played again. I don't know if they'll be rushing out to buy it though, because as I said, it is quite expensive. Well, I was gonna say there are cheaper versions where you get it without the screen printing on the pieces and things like that. But if you want the really nice looking version, it is pretty dear.
I suppose that if people are spending £100 on a game, they expect something big and long and complicated.
Well, I think it does absolutely matter, but I think the other thing to sort of think about it is if, to an extent, if the game is lighter and easier to teach and easier to get to the table, you're going to play it more often and therefore get more money's worth. You know, how many times do we spend hundreds of pounds on a Kickstarter or whatever, and it's so big and complicated, you never actually get it to the table. I think people get kind of hung up on having something that's big and sort of tons of pieces and miniatures and expansions and stuff on Kickstarter. People get kind of fixated on that, and then they get it, and then it's so overwhelming, and the rule book's not very good, and then they never get it to the table. They don't get their money's worth, and it just kind of sits there gathering dust. You know, and so in a way, you might be better off spending a bit more money to get something like this, which you can play and get to the table more easily. Right? It is on Kickstarter, so it's not a game found. It's a Kickstarter, and you can get just one physical copy, which does not include stretch goals or anything else. Doesn't include screen printing. It's called the Explorer's Pledge. It's €59.
Does that include shipping?
None of these will include shipping. Or shipping or tax. So you'll have to pay shipping and tax on top of this once you've acquired it. Oh my god, okay, there's 3 different versions of the meeples, right? So the basic one, they're solid colored wood. Then in the second tier, which is 89 euros, and that comes with the stretch goals and various social goals as well, they're not screen printed, but they're different colors. So that introduces the white and gray wood that you see here, for example, with the color, but there's still no screen printing. And then if you want the different colored wooden meeples with the screen printing, that's called the Clan Masters Pledge, and that's 125 euro. I've played the game, and it really does feel like a finished game, which is nice. It means you're not going to get something that's wildly different to what you've sort of seen as part of this campaign. They might develop it, I don't know, a bit more, but I haven't seen anything like that. It looks like most of the additional stuff is all... Oh, there's another building type, 2 other building types, and some creatures and buildings as well in the campaign. So that might be nice to have. I'd certainly it would be appealing to have the different buildings and things, so you can sub those in and out for a bit of variety as well. That would be nice. So yeah, I think that's pretty much going to wrap up our thoughts here on Rise and Fall. I definitely happily play it again. I'd happily sort of play it as my main game of the evening, even especially if we were so tight on time. I had to sort of pull something out and teach it. But it is pretty dear, and it might be worth just unless you're. I mean, the Clan Masters Pledge is gorgeous, but it's more than twice the price of the Explorer's Pledge. Although the Explorer's Pledge doesn't come with the socials and stuff, so the stretch goals and socials. So you might be best if you're sort of going with the Settler's Pledge, which is 89 euro. Then you get all those stretch goals and nice extra buildings and things like that. All right, we'll call this a show, and we'll see you all in the next video. Thanks everybody for watching, and bye from us.